Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Before we get started, I urge you to share the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. Spread the show. Subscribe so you catch every episode, and give us a good rating and review if you would, please. It helps us climb the charts. Today, I am very excited to be talking about anti-aging. You know, we just did this longevity exploration, which has been incredible. And today we're going to follow that up with a very similar topic. We have anti-aging specialist Sandra Kauffman on the line with us as our guest today. How you doing today, Sandra?
I am doing fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. For the listeners, can you give a brief background on your credential and what led you to eventually create this incredible anti-aging institute and protocol of yours?
Absolutely. So to start off, much like everyone else in the world, I sensed that I was getting older, was extremely frustrated by this. I guess what you call the weekend warrior. I'm sort of a rock climber, mountain climber, etc. And I was dangling off a cliff in my mid 40s, and I thought, I really have got to do something to stop aging, because otherwise I'm going to plummet to my death at some point.
I already love you, Sandra. That's wonderful.
Anyway, so that sort of precipitated this kind of ridiculous quest. But before I went to med school, I was in fact a cell biologist.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just so entranced by cells. I just think they're amazing little blobs, and they do just incredible things. Unfortunately, they don't have insurance plans and they don't pay bills. So I abandoned cell biology and went to med school, which led me through a zillion different detours, which eventually led to doing pediatric anesthesia, of which I am the chief of pediatric anesthesia at a children's hospital in Florida.
Oh, wow. My gosh.
So I have a very varied background between physiology, pharmacology, pharmacodynamics, throw in the cell stuff. It dawned on me that I probably have just enough bizarre background information to untangle longevity and then put it in a sort of more clinical framework. Because the other thing that dawned on me is that there are unbelievably brilliant genius researchers out there, but they do two things that I find moderately annoying. Is number one, they're very researchy and their information doesn't translate to normal humans. Mm-hmm. And two, they live in silos. So what they think is the most important thing in the entire planet, they just sort of fight about which silo is more important. And when I came into this, I don't have a horse in the race. I just didn't want to age. So I decided to compare and contrast all the different silos and come up with more of a comprehensive plan that anyone could follow.
That's incredible. What an incredible story. And I think you're right. I think that that is one of the biggest kind of gaps in medicine is the lack of a holistic approach. And it sounds like that was from the start something that you took into account. Let's go ahead and throw out your URL here, KauffmanProtocol.com. You guys can check it out, KAUFMANN protocol.com. Where do we start here, Sandra?
It's a good question. It's kind of complex.
What can you tell us about, we have a lot of physicians listening to this program. We also have a lot of regular people. But maybe if you had to take a 30,000-foot view, what can you tell us about aging, how cells and human cells age? I know oxidation is a factor that plays into it. And then also what medicinal science is doing to understand and combat and slow the aging process.
All right. So this is going to sound, I'm going to try to do this from an elevated point of view. Some people will be like, oh my gosh, this is just a huge simplification. And other people will be like, oh my God, you're over my head. Yeah. So if I piss off everybody equally, then I figure I've accomplished something. So I decided once upon a time, after reading zillions and zillions of benchwork articles, my office looked like a Post-it office had pretty much exploded. And I kept taking these things and sticking them into different assortment piles. And I came up with 7 main categories as to why cells age. So I call them the 7 tenets of aging. And one could argue that different subcategories could be here or there. But for the sake of simplicity, I have my 7 tenets of aging. And they always in the same order. And that's important. And I'll explain why later. But tenet 1 has to do with DNA issues, right? DNA is the informational systems in our bodies. lots of bad things happen to our DNA over time. Most important are epigenetic modification and telomere length. Obviously, the length gets shorter over time. So those are the two big ones in DNA alterations.
Sure.
Tenet 2 is your mitochondria. Mitochondria fail over time. Big two things in there are, you're absolutely right, oxidation issues, because somewhere between 1 to 10% of our oxygen becomes free radicalized over time. And our endogenous free radical scavenging systems fail over time. So we need to fix that. That's a big thing in mitochondria. And the second thing in mitochondria is everyone gets a nicotinamide deficiency after the age of 40. And you need it for your electron transport chain, as well as for 3 other very important systems. So as you are nicotinamide deficient, you have energy failure.
Ooh, I haven't heard that one before. I'm already looking into it, but please continue.
All right, so that's 2. 3 is a category that I call pathways. Pathways include AMP kinase pathway, your sirtuins, and your mTOR pathway. And of note, the AMP kinase pathway is what gets activated when people go onto their starvation diets or their caloric restriction diets, right? It tells your body less calories are coming in, I should go into hibernation mode, and it promotes longevity. Right? That's why all that stuff sort of works. At the same time, you can also take medications or agents that they're called caloric restriction mimetics that tell your body exactly the same thing without actually having to starve. And those are my favorite things, because I'm not one of those people that likes to starve.
To fast.
I'm terrible at it.
Sure.
But in the category section, also there's 7 sirtuin, there's 7 mammalian sirtuins and their pathways, right? So there's genes and proteins and cellular effects, et cetera. And your sirtuins fail over time, and we have to turn them back on after the age of 40. So that's kind of important. Okay. And then there's the mTOR pathway, which people arguing about the validity of rapamycin and blah, 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 but that's sort of complex. All right. So that's Tenet 3. Okay. Tenet 4 is what I call quality control. And you'll see that there's a factory analysis to all this so people can sort of understand it. Quality control has to do with fixing the widgets that are broken. So there are 4 DNA repair mechanisms that go on in your cells, and there are 4 protein repair mechanisms that go on in your cells. And of course, these systems sort of fail over time, and you can boost them, which is kind of nice. And then the other thing I throw into this category is autophagy, because really it's recycling. If something fails, you recycle it, you reuse the pieces and parts. Wow. So that kind of helps. So that is category 4. Category or Tenet 5 is what I call your security system, which is basically inflammation and your immune system, because they're interrelated, right? Your immune system helps you when you're young. As you get older, it becomes more inflammatory, leading to all sorts of problems, right? Leukemias, lymphomas, more infections. You become systemically inflamed, that sort of thing. 6 is what I call individual cell requirements. So this is because a red cell is different than a liver cell. Same way a senescent cell is different than a stem cell. So different cell types need very specific things to be addressed. And then lastly, Tenet 7, I call waste management, because you have to take out the trash. So this is mostly glycation issues, because glucose, of course, bonds to molecules inside your body, creating something called AGEs, advanced glycation end products. And those things destroy collagen, they destroy tissues, they stick to DNA, lipids, proteins, create a huge inflammatory process, as well as just destroying other types of tissues. So that's why glucose is bad for you. Right. And then the last thing in that category is lipofuscin accumulation. And this is basically gunks that get stuck in long-lived cells as a byproduct of like autophagy and stuff. Anyway, so as a whole, that is why you age.
That is insane. So that is all the amalgamation that goes into making us older. The whole lot of it, our joints breaking down, and the skin, and the cognitive function, and all of that comes from the accumulation of these things in your estimation. I am very interested, and we have to do a little diving as much as you want into each of them. Not so much each and every one of them, because we've covered quite inflammation is a topic that we've covered extensively, but a few of the tenets really stood out. So I got to dig in here. First of all, the nicotinamide. Well, tell me about this. I know there's a lot of NMN supplements. That's what those types of things are for, right?
Yes. So nicotinamide is so interesting. The molecule is just, it's amazing what evolution does, right? It takes one molecule and then it uses it all over your cells. And it's just amazing. So as I mentioned, it's really necessary in the form of NAD as a part of the electron transport chain.
Okay.
So, right. So if you don't have NAD, your chain sort of falls apart and your mitochondria don't work. That's problem number one. Number two, your body actually takes the molecule apart and uses pieces of it to fix holes in your DNA, right? You have 10 to the fifth DNA errors per cell per day.
Don't freak me out.
That's a lot. Yeah. And the good news is you have repair mechanisms. And if you didn't, you would die and it would be horrible. And in fact, a lot of these diseases, I'm so sorry. A lot of these diseases where people get really old really fast is because they can't repair their DNA.
Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate, but I can see what you mean by that. So that plays into, I'm sure, Tenet 4, but you're saying that the NAD, these types of compounds are crucial. Can I ask you, do these supplements work? You know, I've had doctors on. So the supplements, you would stand by the supplements, the NAD plus type boosters. Those are good. Those are effective.
Let me just. There's 4 reasons that you need NAD. Okay. You've got the electron transport chain. You got the DNA repair. It is a necessary coenzyme for your sirtuins. And those are all of your anti-aging pathways. Okay. So you can take as much sirtuin activator as you want. If you're NAD deficient, it's not going to do anything. Wow. Right? Wow. And then lastly, it serves as a communication device between your mitochondria and your nucleus. So if you are deficient, your nucleus is going to be screaming at your mitochondria all day long, and they're just not going to do anything. So as you get more deficient, your cell has to decide which piece of thing it's going to give up more. And essentially, you're just sort of behind the 8 ball.
That's really interesting. So for the listener, if this is maybe ringing true to you, look into NAD plus boosters. I've also seen like NMN listed a lot.
Right. So here's the scoop with all of this. It's really quite interesting. Chromadex is a very smart company, and they bought up all the patents and trademarks to make nicotinamide riboside, which was the first oral supplement demonstrated to work. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. They contracted with LCM Health to make something called Basis, where they put it with pterostilbene because that's your sirtuin activator.
I see this right in front of me.
Right? But then they sort of got screwed over because LCM Health decided to use a different brand from a different country. So then they got really angry and started pulling their products. So it used to see nicotinamide riboside in a bunch of things. They pulled it out, and now they're starting to go back. But as a competitor, someone came up with nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is one enzymatic step away in the system. So it's really, really close. And you'll find And you'll find some people love one and some people love the other. And the answer is I'm not really sure because I'm not a bench researcher which one is actually better. I think they both work. NR has all gold standard studies after it, but I don't know. I'm not 1,000% convinced, one versus the other.
Sure.
But NR, is in fact the original. However, because people know that it's super important to do this, everyone wants to get on the bandwagon because the oral ones are all copyrighted, patented, whatever you call it. Mm-hmm. They're working on other delivery mechanisms, right? There's a nasal spray. There's an injection. Wow. There are patches. There's IV infusions. So does it really matter which mechanism you use? And the answer is probably not.
Wow. That's super interesting, and I love the little the background on that. My understanding is this type of thing can play into more than just aging symptoms. Doesn't this also have to do with your overall energy levels and things like that? If you're suffering from fatigue, can NAD booster sometimes solve that?
Absolutely. So you have to look at aging is simply other diseases to the nth degree.
Okay.
Right. For example, if you are diabetic. Ultimately, we are all going to be diabetic.
Right.
Right? We are all going to have cardiovascular disease. We are all going to have these things because of the etiology of the disease itself.
Okay.
What part of your cell is failing? If you can fix those cells, you can delay both the disease and the aging process simultaneously.
Okay. Really interesting. This is an eye-opening interview already. So listen,
I'm so glad I could be of use.
This truly, very, very Very enlightening interview. So this NAD plus, this plays perfectly into the next point that I wanted to dig into. The next tenet number 4, these DNA repair mechanisms. I'm interested into knowing more about how these function, and then also what we can do, literally what we can take control of our own health and do to try to aid these repair mechanisms, if anything.
So what's really interesting, so in terms of DNA repair mechanisms, there's 4 of them. And it has to do if it's a single strand repair or a double strand repair, because double strand is less common, but it has more of a horrible effect, right? And so the idea is to boost the specific enzymes that are responsible for that.
Okay.
The 2 most common things that people take that's over the counter, one is something called polypodium. They sell it as something called fern block because it can repair the damage after being burned in the sun.
Whoa. I have not heard
that's
that.
That's what people sort of feel.
Yeah.
The good news is it works all over your body, not just in your skin.
Whoa. That's fascinating.
The other one is called AC11, and it comes from a plant in the Amazon, and it too boosts all of the enzymes necessary for DNA repair mechanisms.
Jeez. So supplementation, and is there anything we can do diet-wise, or are these really hard to find compounds when it comes to like just a variety of diets?
These are really hard to find.
Oh, man.
I mean, I wish you luck. No, but, and a lot of these things are in common foods. The question is can you get enough of it in any one particular food source?
Right.
And one of the best examples is something called pterostyl that I mentioned earlier. It's a good sirtuin activator, and it does a variety of other things as well. It comes from blueberries. Right.
Sure.
But to get enough, you have to eat like 3 gallons of blueberries a day. And honestly, you would turn into a giant blueberry. So, is it worth it? Fine, sprinkle some blueberries on your oatmeal. But if you truly want the effect, you may need like more than that.
Yeah, that's why we have extracts. That's like competitive eating levels of blueberries, and that's just not feasible for most humans. So.
Right? I mean, you would, to walk out looking like a Willy Wonka character or something, totally. Right?
That's an interesting shopping cart, 3 gallons of blueberries.
But the one thing I do want to mention is what's kind of cool is there isn't a 1-to-1 ratio of agent to what it does. Right? As I said, nicotinamide does 4 different things. Other things do many things as well, sure. And they do them at different levels. So I created something called the Kauffman rating scale. So every time you see one of my agents, you'll see a 7-digit number after it. And each of the 7 digits represents how potent it is in each of the 7 tenets, which is why the order is important, right? So if agent X does amazing things for your DNA, and I've got a plethora of evidence for it, it gets a 3. If it does nothing at all, and I've looked high and low, it gets a 0, right? So it's a hierarchy of evidence. 0 does nothing. 1 is mostly in cells. 2 is in like rodent models, and then 3 is human evidence.
Oh, so I like that a lot.
So that way, if you're trying to put it together a comprehensive program, because you're aging all of the 7 categories, people take their agents, line them up, add the numbers together, and then you sort of have an overall impression of how avidly you are affecting change in each of the tenets individually.
I could talk to you for a long time, Sandra. I really could. We need to focus in on a few things before I let you go here. I know you only have a few more minutes with us. This is, if you ever want to come back, I assume you'll see a little boost. We have a very active audience. You'll probably get someone reaching out to you if you do give out any sort of Instagram or website. I know you have the Kauffman protocol, but anyways, on that subject, Tenet 7, taking out the trash. We got to dig into this one. How much of this is, when we talk about detoxification and all of that, does that fall into this category? And follow-up question, do we have it right when you see your average detox protocol, or are we way off?
People are going to hate me for this. I think it's kind of crazy. I'm not a huge believer in the detox system. I think that your cells are incredibly bright, and they're going to get rid of stuff that you don't need. Mm-hmm. But certain things do have lasting problems. Glucose is the biggest one.
Right. That's the one you highlighted in the tenet. And why is that so damaging? Is it because of the amount we consume, or just, what I mean?
Because glucose is sticky. It's a very sticky molecule. I tell people, your lollipop sticks to you on the outside, it sticks to you on the inside. And we need glucose. So we can't really get rid of it, but it's just very, very, very sticky. And so it bonds to everything. right? And it just glycates your entire body. So when people, for example, measure their hemoglobin A1C, you're measuring how much glucose is stuck to your red cells, right? But your red cells turn over every 3 months, so you can change that number. But you can't really change the glycation of everything else because it doesn't turn over, right? So it sticks to your skin. And when it sticks to your skin, specifically to your collagen molecules, and if your collagen molecules try to slide around, they break and rip. And that leads to structural failure of skin and then all of your organs. And it's one of the reasons that you, for example, have like heart failure as you get older. Even if you don't have coronary disease, your collagen is falling apart, right? It's why skin droops. It's why one of the reasons, not the entire reason, but it's one of the reasons that bones are more fragile. It's one of the reasons your teeth rot when you get older. So if you can maintain the collagen structure and get rid of the AGEs, you do way better off. And the argument that I have is that when you are diabetic, you have huge amounts of glucose all the time. But a normal person, even with normal amounts of glucose, over the course of 90, 100 years, is still going to be horribly glycated. So one of the games I play is how much can I anti-glycate?
What does that look like? What is the anti-glycation process like?
So what's really interesting is, so to take a glucose molecule and have it become an AGE, it's 7 non-enzymatic steps, right? Everything is enzymes in your body. And there are certain things you can take that block those enzymatic steps. Uh-huh. So, for example, carnosine is a fantastic example. It is a dipeptide. It's in our bodies naturally. Men have more than women. Young people have more than old people. So as you get older, you have a ton less. But what it does do is it just blocks the glycation process. There's even some evidence it can sort of reverse it. So, for example, there's these wonderful things called N-acetyl-carnosine eye drops. And if you put them in your eye, you can actually make cataracts and presbyopia better because you're getting rid of some of the glycation in your lens that prevents you to be able to like focus.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's all because of the glycation.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that is it again, is that something you can find in a supplement or what treatment?
Oh yeah. Carnosine, actually athletes take it because it also blocks acidosis formation in your muscles. Oh. So if you happen to be on it, you don't burn when you're like working out and killing yourself, which I love because I'm also athletic, right? So I take it, I'm blocking my glycation, I'm saving my muscles, and my vision's better. All around a win-win-win.
Is carnosine in coffee? Now, this is a show about coffee, and there's a compound in coffee that reduces the lactic acid and all these other. I don't think it is in coffee.
It's chlorogenic acid.
Well, yeah, chlorogenic acid is the antioxidant.
That's my
compound.
favorite.
Yeah, that's
no. Chlorogenic acid blocks AGE formation.
Oh, does it? So that must be what the actual effect that okay. Interesting.
Well, I mean, there's lots of things in coffee, but chlorogenic acid is my favorite thing in coffee.
So hold on. Now you must be up to date. Now, normally when I say that, it's like a half and half when I have a doctor on this show, whether they go like, oh, that's interesting, or whether they go on a whole thing like, have you read the research around coffee? As an anti-aging specialist, you must have, right?
So the answer is yes and no. I tend to focus on individual ingredients.
Ah, I see. Then don't focus on coffee.
Right?
We don't know what the F.
Right.
We know some good things, but we're still trying to study this drink.
Right. Well, the problem is it's just like tea, right? Because it comes from various places around the globe, all of the micro ingredients are going to be extremely different from place to place.
Even how it's
grown.
It's
very hard to, right? So it's really difficult. But chlorogenic acid is sort of like the most famous thing that's in coffee. But it's just like tea, right? White tea is different than black tea, which is different than green tea, and it's the same leaf. Right? It's just how it's processed. So white tea, for example, is an MMP inhibitor. Green tea is a better epigenetic modulator. So there's just so many variables. It's hard to keep track of all of those sorts of things.
We're going to get along just fine, Sandra. This is wonderful. If you ever need another appearance, we'd love to have you back on.
Sounds fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap it up, though, I got to bring it back to glycation just really quickly. We'll wrap that, and then we'll give out all your plugs, and I will let you go. The glycation is, I'm going to get super, super lay person here. Please correct me if I'm way off. Is that why, you take a look at, because glucose, this is what everything breaks down in, no matter what form of sugar you're taking in through your diet, this is what everything breaks down into, right? So is this why Americans age so poorly because of our diet? And you go to like Okinawa and everyone's got perfect skin. Is it really heavily a diet thing and taking in way too much effing sugar, or am I oversimplifying it?
Well, I would argue that's one of the components. I mean, Americans, the Western diet is terrible, right?
We age poorly.
And we age ridiculously poorly. We rely on medical stuff that we shouldn't, right? So people eat like crap, they don't exercise, and they expect everyone's going to take care of them, for the most part, right? I shouldn't generalize, because I'm sure you have a very
My audience,
fantastic audience,
that's
right?
True.
But in general, that's not the case, right? We have childhood obesity.
Right?
I mean, it's really crazy. People are either like off the deep end and they're super nutritious and they're super healthy, or they're like way not, right? Sort of
the dichotomy
population,
it's
right?
It's a polarized. That is what
right.
America has become, baby. We could
right.
go down that road.
And to be perfectly honest, I have to admit that I'm the world's horriblest eater, but caveat, but like, I can't stand salad. I just think it's horrific. But I know every ingredient that's in a salad that's beneficial, and I take it separately.
I like that. Okay, so at least you're getting those compounds in there. You are a modern day alchemist. I almost said alchemist.
Yeah, I'm not a huge eater, right? So I'm like, as a kid, I was always like, can't you just make that in a pill? And it turns out you can.
You crack me up, Sandra. Oh my God. We got to do a part 2. Okay. We're coming up at the top of the hour here. Throw out everything. You got the Kauffman protocol. Any Instagrams or websites you want to share with my audience today?
Yeah. So the Instagram is just Kauffman Anti-Aging. And I usually put talks and stuff that I'm going to be doing up there, or any interesting tidbits. When people ask me questions on Instagram, I'm really terrible about answering it, because my 14-year-old is sort of in charge of that. And she's like, Mom, I don't know. However, the website is kaufmanprotocol.com, and my email is on one of those pages, and I answer all emails personally. And every time I do one of these shows, I get a zillion questions, and I will tell people I answer every question myself. I don't have a staff. I don't have anything. It's just me. And since this is an elaborate hobby and not my actual job, it takes me longer than people want, but I put thought into every answer, and I do get to everyone.
Oh, I love that. I think you'll get a few. I really do think you'll get a few. I have to apologize. I didn't ask how to pronounce your name. Usually after I saw the spelling, I thought Kauffman. I apologize.
It makes no difference.
Dr. Sandra Kauffman, everybody.
I don't really. It makes no difference.
Okay. We appreciate you, Sandra. We'll let you go, let you off the line, and then I'll close it out. Thank you so much. We hope to speak to you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Sandra. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Lovely first-time guest. Did she fit in well with the show right away or what, everybody? Incredible. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. I know you did. We'll see you next time on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. Have an extraordinary day, everybody. Bye-bye.